Welcome back, everybody. So in our last discussion, we spoke about the personal is political. And the point I wanted us hopefully to come to an agreement on that the problems we may think are personal. I did something wrong or I'm weak. Whilst that may have a truth to it, we need to look at the problem in a wider context. And what that means is that there are societal influences, and what that means that stretch back hundreds and thousands of years. There are societal influences that are molding and influencing our decisions. And it's so insidious that we're unaware of it. So we can call this the patriarchal model. We can call it capitalism. In fact, I would go so far as to say whatever political model a country or a society follows, it will always be anti-feminist or anti-radical feminist. Because despite what the people may tell you, they're all built upon the model of the survival of the fittest. And that means that men will be over women. And that's why we have all these problems in the world. We had that discussion because I wanted us to see that that wasn't just a personal question. It's a political question. The question of the Sabbath I'm referring to. What I mean by that, because I'm interchanging the word political, social, and movement. So we can call this and that means, and this movement is changing its views on Sabbath keeping. That was my guess based upon the prophetic model that I've laid out in early writings. And as I've received feedback over the week, I think the assumption that I made was correct. Once again, I'm not giving a moral position on the rights and wrongs of Sabbath keeping. But I've heard people say things like the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. So you remember the board work that we had from last week, hopefully. And I want to just draw the line that we had. Although I'm not going to draw it, I want the members here to do that. So this is the Millerite line I'm referring to. So here's our line. So this is the line of the Millerites. Where would we begin? 1798. Where would we end? 1844? 1863? 44? 88? Well, we have lots of different answers. 65? So I'm going to go with 63, which is what I think Linda said to begin with. I'm assuming the 65 came from last week. Second Advent. So where does 1863 come from? Why have we labeled 63? From the 2520. So when you go through the various dates, not every single one, but most of them, they're all connected with time. And so the wisdom was that the end would also be connected with time, which would be 63. So last week we spoke about 65 because what happened in 65?
Civil War. Civil War ended.
Civil War ended.
I was putting they actually did put in God we trust or something to that effect, religious on the money.
Okay, there's something about putting God onto money. In God we trust. So we didn't speak about that, and we didn't speak about the assassination. The 13th Amendment. So the 13th Amendment is why 65 came up in our discussion last week. So does anybody want to give any more waymarks in here? Oh, what was this one called? And this one? Sorry? Okay, so this is the second Advent. Any other ones? 50 is what? So we have 1850 as the Sunday law. Anything else? So Kathy's looking at, I think, the board work from last week, which is fine. But I didn't want to assume that that was all correct. Um, 1840 is what? Okay, so Sarah said 1840 is the empowerment of the message. What would it be with these sort of symbols? What would you call that? I can't hear. If I put 1840 here, what would I call it? What? Sorry?
I don't know.
Well, you gave me a date and you told me it's the time of the end. Got a date, Sunday law, a date, second advent. So my question is, if I put 1840, what do I call it? So we're going to just call it the empowerment of the first. That's what you're going to put. And that's the major waymark. Does everybody agree? Or comment? No? Okay, so people have said the restraint of Islam, but the title just put. I was going to put 9/11 there. And you said empowerment of the first. And someone said 9/11. Okay, anything else? One more? We've got 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe we should get one more. 1844 in here. Kathy said no. Here? Kathy said no. '61. So what's 1861? Close of probation. Are we okay with that, everybody? So Bob, could you put an agricultural model over that?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to look for what 4 dispensations. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Plowing, early rain, the latter rain.
It's too fast. I'm going to try red. Hopefully that works. The ploughing. Early rain. Latter rain. And harvest. Are we all okay with that? So, as we discussed last week, some of the other dates that people said were correct, but they're minor waymarks. So as you know, we went to the Sunday law, and we're making that slavery. And Ellen White, what is Ellen White making it? Is she saying the test? Remember, this was written in, I think it was in 48, this was written. She knows what's happening in the world. In 48, she's going to G up the movement, prepare it to do its work. And they're going to do, I say they, what are they going to do in response to the 48 message? They're going to make a chart. And Ellen White says that they didn't make the chart, God made it. And the purpose of the chart is what? So it's a tool for the, and I call it an external tool for the world. It's an evangelistic tool. So even without the time of trouble chapter here, the chart tells you what the message to the world is, what the great test is. So Ellen White's consistent all the way through her messages. Okay, do we agree with that? You go from 44, where she has, I think, her vision. One of the visions. Onto 50, onto 88. All that she speaks about is the fourth commandment, the Sabbath. She has dreams and visions of it. Do we agree that she's consistent from 44 to 88? That 44-year history. And we can go past that, but we're just working on that history. Yes?
Just because slavery is.
So Kathy said that she's confused. So am I. And that's why we're discussing this. Is that she has a consistent message from 44 to 84. Sorry, 88. And that message all the way through is about the Sabbath. Yes. So we'll go for 46 then, if we're going to make that point. I only went from 44 because that's one of our waymarks, but that's fine. And she has a singular message about the Sabbath. So the question is, why did she talk about slavery here? What is she doing? What point is she making? When she says, look at the United States. And who is the United States? In that story. In that chapter, in that story. Did someone say something? not king of the north. Some, you've got to speak louder. I can't hear you.
Speaking like the dragon.
So she's this is said the United States is the dragon. What, you can't whisper. So I don't, because I beast. Protestantism. We're in chapter 33. Chapter 33. Yep, United States is Can my translator tell me when I'm back online? Am I back online? Yeah, am I back online? Okay, we're all good to go. So I don't know the last bit. My question was, United States, what is it represented as or symbolized by? And it's not the image of the beast, it's not the beast, it's Babylon. The sin of the United States is slavery. So if she's going to make that point in the flow of this story, what is she doing? What point is she trying to make? Because it's not consistent with this Sabbath story. You don't even have to go to 88 to talk about Jacob's time of trouble or what the great test is. You don't need to go to the great controversy. You just, it tells you in spiritual gifts. And that's not the only early work that deals with this issue. So what are your thoughts on her reason for doing that? Bob?
The Sabbath, I see as a heavenly model, and slavery is earthly thing that Babylon is doing, and it's comparing and seeing how they don't mix and realizing where we need to move.
So Bob says that the Sabbath is a heavenly issue and that slavery is a human or an earthly issue, and how they don't mix. Linda?
The Protestants are using these scriptures. Has anything to do with what you asked?
Okay, so Linda didn't respond to the question directly, but she says, we know that Protestantism was using the Bible, using inspiration to defend slavery. Any other thoughts? Why does Ellen White talk about slavery in the midst of a Sabbath issue?
God if you can't even love, if you can't love your fellow human being?
We can't love God if we can't love our fellow human being. Alyssa?
I think this is where I start to see the 4 and the 6 coming together in inequality. And I'm okay with being wrong with that, but it's where I start to see the priority of the Sabbath with human rights.
Alyssa said this is where she begins to see the 4 and the 6. The Sabbath and human rights. Alyssa, are you saying that the Sabbath is going low and the human rights are coming up? What point were you making?
Yes, that humanity was being elevated.
She said that she saw that humanity was being elevated, which is what I just said.
Oh,
If you elevate humanity, you drop the Sabbath. Well, either you have equality or you have hierarchy. Unless you're saying now, equality is now being equal to the Sabbath, or human rights is now being equal to them.
yes, and that's where I'm okay being wrong, but that's what I'm seeing.
Anyone else? Okay, so a suggestion has been made that now Ellen White in her ministry is going to start dealing with the issue of human rights. And she's going to now incorporate that concept into the testing message that's going to the world. So I hope everybody gets that simple idea. So I just want to move on a little bit. So let's do the line of Eden to Eden. So how does Ellen White describe that line or that process? What does she say? It's all just review from last week. Yes, can you hear me now? Pam said that it's the twin institution model. Well, so I think last week we gave a reference for that. From the Mount of 53, paragraph 2, I think. Yes, I've got confirmation. Okay, so the reference we gave was Thoughts from the Mount of Blessings, page 63, paragraph 2. And that when Ellen White talks about the restoration of the twin institutions, which was Sabbath and marriage. And that's not a new concept for this movement. You'll know that for a long time we've discussed this issue. And I think is it 2017 where we begin to discuss this issue of the restoration of marriage. Which comes under the remit or the guise of the nature of humanity. So Ellen White's going to go from Eden to Eden. And she's going to talk about the restoration of these institutions. And as you know, Elder Tess took up that concept and she refined it significantly. So here's our line. And I want us to spend a little bit of time to construct this line. This is Elder Tess's Eden to Eden line. So let's start populating this. So we just do rapid fire. You just shout out and I'll put on the board what you tell me to. Sorry? Sexism. You got to tell me where I've got to put sexism. You got to tell me where to put things. So you want me to put sexism here? Can't hear you. Okay, where do you put sexism? You mean across, not down, across. Yeah. So, and you said this was what? Anyone else? David? So you want to call this gender? Yes, that's correct. And you want to move back to here. So David wants to call sexism gender and move it back to the beginning place and take Eden out. Yeah. Yes? Okay. So Penny said no. Is that good to go? So Penny says yes, this is good as it is. Kathy? Worship? So you're going to put worship here? And you tell us what you think. You tell us what you think. Okay, so Kathy thinks worship should go here.
My brain is.
So you say worship should go before sexism or gender. Okay, that's fine. Anyone else? So that was worship, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Sarah, you said what? So Sarah wants to put worship here. Okay, so we'll put worship here. And then we'll explain whether or not it's correct. And if it's not correct, we'll go back and look at your model. So we have worship. The next one.
Slavery.
Race.
So slavery. And I've got race. Yes?
Yes.
We're not looking at our phones, are we? Yes. Sorry? That's out of order? Oh. So tell me when I'm online. I can hear you now, yes? Okay. So we've had some discussion about whether or not this is correct. But we're going to go with this as it stands for the moment, at least. And so if we have a chiasm, then we would have slavery, race, worship, and then sexism, gender, then the final one would be Eden, yeah? Okay, so is everybody reasonably happy with that? Okay, so we have a good chiasm. And I think we often do call it 1, 2, 3. So what is this model teaching us? Let's see what we understand from this. So let's begin at the beginning. What is this? This Eden, what is it trying to portray or to teach? What point are we making when we put Eden here?
From the beginning.
Beginning. So we have beginning, which would mean that's the end. Okay with that, Linda? If it's beginning and end. So we've got beginning. What else? Bob.
Steps downward into sin, in the race flesh.
So I want to know what this is, not the steps. Just tell me what this is. Because they're the steps.
Before sin entered.
So what's this?
Before sin entered. Human family.
So we've got the beginning and we've got before sin. Anyone else? And so David said it's equality. Anyone else? It's the beginning of our story. It's before sin and it's equality.
The only difference between that Eden and new Eden is an education. Even though they were warned, there's a lot more education that learns out of this.
Okay, so Bob gave a story about our journey through here. This education process, which is the knowledge of good and evil. Catherine?
I say that is the kingdom of God.
So we've got the kingdom of God. I was going to put the king of the north, but I'll trick people if I. So this is on earth. One second. Okay, sorry, I got thrown out. So this is at the beginning. It's before sin. There's equality. And this is the kingdom of God. And it's on earth. Everybody okay with that? It may not be everything, but it's one. We've got 5 points about a description of that waymark. So let's go to the end. So we know that this is the end. So I'll just put that. I won't ask. Next point. After sin. Okay, so we've got before sin, after sin. Good. Next point. Equality.
And everything from that
So Kathy wants to change after sin to no sin. So if we use the word, if we go from beginning to end, okay? Okay. So depending on how people used words, I think both are legitimate after the sin problem or the end of sin.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. So we're okay with the end of sin. And I think people said equality. Next point. And geography. Earth.
Eden is restored.
Okay, so you're gonna put Earth. Yeah, that's what she means, the new Earth. Anyone else? Everybody's good with the new Earth? That means no one has a different opinion. New Earth? So everyone's new Earth. So this point here, if that was the first, gender and sexism was the first issue. What's this one? This is the last issue then. And so the first issue is number one, is gender and sexism. And then that would mean when we come on to the other side, this number one gender and sexism would be the last. So we've got first and last. So what phrase do we use when we talk about last with end time prophecy? Linda?
It's the time in the end, but.
Time at the end, omega. So we've got the alpha and the omega. I'm going to suggest this would be the final test, the great test. Okay, so the great test, coming back to this line, is where? I'll rephrase my question. I want to put this number one at the end, the omega, on this line here, on the Millerite line. And we've got 5 waymarks. Tell me where the number one goes. Linda. So Linda says it goes here, 1850. Anyone else? Sorry?
The beginning.
It goes in 1798. So I put that one here. That's what Alyssa says or suggesting. Sarah? 1850. Bob?
When it comes to understanding, yeah, you have plowing early rain, so either put 1798 or 1850, but I put it on 1850.
50. Okay, so we're gonna go with 50. Because what is that waymark? The great test, the final test. upon which the destiny of all humanity rests. No other test after that. No other test after that. Will you agree? Okay, so on this line, when do you get to the end? What is the end? This line. 1863. The end of the line is 61, not 63. 63. And that's the second advent. Okay. So where do we mark the kingdom of God, equality, the end of sin? Where do we mark that? Because people have said earth. So that would mean it would be here. After 1,000. Correct? That's what that would mean. Would be marking that. So does everybody still agree that that's what it should be? So let's go to heaven. And do we have all of those things in heaven? All these things where it says Eden. Which is at the second advent. Do we have the end of sin at the second advent? Do we have equality at the second advent in heaven? So when we go to heaven, we're not going to have equality. Bob says no. Linda. So Linda says during these 1,000 years, there won't be equality because people won't be up to speed. They won't have learned everything. So does that mean there'll be sin in heaven? Linda? By your own definition. So Linda mentioned the judgment in heaven. My recollection is the judgment isn't judging anybody in heaven, it's judging everybody who isn't in heaven. So you have to put the judgment bit aside. There's no judgment.
They won't follow things that we know, Sabbath, vegan diet.
So my question simply is there going to be sin in heaven? You said yes. Or no? Okay, so Linda says people will live up to the light they have. Linda, how long has it taken you to learn about radical feminism? Sorry? 5 years. So if it took you 5 years, you think it's going to take people 1,000 years to learn it? Because Adventism does a 1-month evangelistic series, I was told. And they teach everything. So we don't need 1,000 years to do all of that.
They don't know how.
So people don't know about radical feminism and equality. My point is, it doesn't take 1,000 years to learn it. If we can do it in 5 years. I'll let someone else contribute. Bob. Will there be sin in heaven? You said yes. So sin, Bob says there will be sin in heaven.
Because the sin problem started in heaven. Sin problem started in heaven.
Because Bob says the sin problem began in heaven.
So
And it gets resolved in heaven. So the sin problem in heaven, on this line, where is it? So the sin problem is here. I've got heaven and I've got sin. So if we've got a chiasm, heaven must be here. And we've got the new earth here. So it's not quite right. Okay, so anyone else about the resolution of sin? Are we going to be sinning in heaven? Bob says yes. So I heard a loud no over on my left. Kathy?
What's the probation about?
So Kathy says there can't be any sin because what does close of probation mean? My response to that, speaking on their behalf, the others, the close of probation is for us living at the end of the world. It's not for all those bad Christians in bygone ages.
What do you mean bygone ages as the dead in the grave?
Sorry?
What do you mean bygone ages dead in the grave? Christian?
All those people who are dead. William Miller, bad Christian.
I'm not saying.
So the reason why they say that there'll be sin is because there's an education that they need to have, not that you need to have. I'm not saying you agree with them. I'm just telling you the logic. Your sin problem is sorted out here. Martin Luther's sin problem wasn't sorted out on this earth. It'll have to get sorted out here. That's what they're saying.
Oh, okay, I didn't understand that. I thought it was a mistake. I still disagree.
Martin Luther didn't understand about Sabbath and all that, and he changed a lot of things, but the work was not done, you know, and then in the Baptist.
So people are explaining the lives of Christians of past ages. So I still want to answer, does sin end at this waymark? It has to because of this chiasm. But we're discussing where the geography is. If the geography is in heaven or on earth. And what you call an education process here, I think Bob was calling sin. So God's kingdom is that established at the second advent, or is it established after the millennium? So Bob says after the millennium, he's firm on that. New Earth, just created, to new Earth, recreated. Is there still sin in the universe, or the marks of sin? Are there living sinners? Are there living sinners in the universe? Here. Kathy, are there living sinners in the universe here? We'll say here, in the middle. Yes?
I can't say is, the way I understand it is 1,000 years is for judging those, the wicked who didn't make it, and I thought they were slain dead when Christ came. And they're then resurrected.
My question was simple.
But I can't give a simple answer.
So Kathy says she can't give me a simple answer, and I'm going to push her to say she can. Because I've not asked for an explanation, I've just asked for your position.
Is there sin?
In the 1,000 years, are there sinners alive in the universe?
And my understanding, no.
So Kathy says no. And did anybody say yes? Oh, so a few people said yes. David, name some.
You said anybody. Satan survived. All of it.
Okay, so David said Satan's alive here. And well. And so the sin problem at a universal level hasn't been fixed yet. There's still some work to do. So it's not just about the education, which I suspect is not going to take 1,000 years. And I imagine that the judgment's not going to take 1,000 years. So I don't know the reason why we've given that long a period in heaven. But there are various elements to that question and answer. And one that's often not dwelt upon is the sin problem that remains on earth. Satan and Satan's cohort, the angels. Okay, any more thoughts? No?
Everything, the wicked sinners, they're raised again, and they try to put them into it, right? And then they're, they're burned.
Okay, so Kathy says, sorry, Linda said, right here, all dead sinners, Kathy, all those dead sinners are all alive again on earth, and the kingdom's on earth. So the sin problem, not only is it not not only is it not resolved yet, but if you were a commentator warfare, who's going to win the fight? Who's going to win the battle? I would argue that it looks like Satan's going to win. Because he's got all the equipment, he's got all the generals, and we've got nobody. And we're in some little city walled in, under siege. So I think there's a good argument to make that from appearances, it looks like things are hanging in the balance. So whilst we might not be sinning in heaven, because sin is a deliberate act, if we can put it that way simply, we know the sin problem isn't really sorted out at the universal level until the end of the 1,000 years. Okay, so I'm not saying we're all correct here to everyone online. But I think it's reasonable to put Earth here. But what that means is that this line here has the second advent somewhere here, long before the end of that line. So if you don't have a problem with that conceptually, we're good to go. So we've done the 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. We're happy with that. So if this was the alpha test, gender and sexism, then gender and sexism is the omega test, the final test. And this is what was so powerful about this model. It wasn't some members, some women who said we've been mistreated and we want to put a stop to this because this is not Christianity. It went far beyond what? The personal to the systemic or the political. And so now I've substituted the word political for another word. Which one? Because this is the line now. So it's not a personal issue, it's a... I heard another word. I thought I heard prophetic. Yes. So I thought it was... It's now become, this is a prophetic issue. And so we can talk about the personal and the prophetic. I apologize to the men here because not everybody is like that. Why have men become so bad? It's not just they were born bad or created bad. And I don't mean your birth, I mean the birth of men. Because it says here, when God looked upon what God had made, it was good. So men are inherently good. They have to be. So why have they become so bad? It has to be a prophetic issue. That's what I want us to see. We can call it a political issue or a social phenomena. We can call it patriarchy. So these are all human names and they're all correct. I'm not saying that they're not correct. So when I say a prophetic matter, you agree that this is a prophetic issue. We all agree with that. Because this is a line of prophecy. So I know we talk about humanity, but I just want to focus on men because they're the perpetrators mostly. Here at the beginning, in Eden, what's the purpose of God creating men? The same applies to women as well, but I just want to focus on it. Why did God create Adam? Carol? In his image. So God created Adam in God's image because God wanted a counterpart. And that was from Penny. So God created Adam to be a counterpart. So without discussing in detail what a counterpart means, it has various elements to it. One of them is companionship, but another one is to be one's equal or to fill in a gap that was there before. So the idea of completeness. So there's companionship, equality, and completeness all wrapped up in the counterpart. And as Adventists, we know a lot more about that story that precedes that. Which was the war in heaven that Bob was talking about beforehand. Without that understanding, this doesn't make much sense. That this was Eden. Eden doesn't make sense without the controversy before it. So if we agree that the subject of the counterpart is the subject of Bible prophecy, then as we walk through this line, and we've changed, or I've changed political to prophecy, what's the basis behind that? What do you think the reason or the justification for that would be? You give me your thoughts, I'll give you mine. Well,
God's in charge.
God's in charge. What else? Okay, I'll give you my thoughts then. We're here, and it said, number one, it says gender and sexism. Get that place. How did we get to the place of gender and sexism at number one? Something happened. What happened? Sin happened. And what was that? What was that sin? Just simply. You speaking? Oh. So Eve did something wrong. So when Eve did that wrong thing, who was the motivator or the instigator of that crime? The serpent, but it wasn't a serpent, or at least it may have been a serpent, but it was possessed. It's Satan. And what is Satan's purpose to do all of that? So it's to get even with God, to take revenge upon God. Anyone else?
That was his kingdom.
So it's to establish his kingdom, to Satan's kingdom. Kathy. So Kathy says the purpose and mind of Satan here, just before number one, was to make, I know it's Eve there, but we're going to say to make man, Adam, not God's counterpart, but Satan's counterpart. And so the way Satan will do that is identified here at number one. He's going to create strife and struggle and warfare between human beings. And then begins our steps down. So I want to suggest that the reason we can say the political is prophetic is because Satan had a plan. It was to separate humanity from God and make humanity Satan's counterpart, not God's counterpart. We're humans. Adam and Eve were superhumans, if I can use that term. They were powerful. The Bible does not describe how powerful they were. And I'm not talking about Adam being 7 feet tall and weighing half a ton. I don't mean that power. There's a spiritual element to our being that I think most of humanity is not aware of. So Satan knew if Satan could have humanity as the counterpart, after enough children, Satan could have a super army and make a realistic, a sensible, realistic attack upon God's kingdom and win. Satan knew that at the beginning, and I'm just going to say the beginning here. Because what do we see at the end? That exact same model being played out. So, you know, if it's at the end, it has to be at the beginning. So we're not guessing. That's my point. So I want to say that the political is a prophetic subject because we're just pawns on the chessboard, and there are two players, the king of the north, and we could call the other one the king of the south, but that king wants to be the king of the north. This is God against Satan. And it becomes personal. So it's not God. It's Christ. We would say Jesus, but I think the names are complicated. So if we just say Jesus versus Satan, and they're going to fight a proxy war. Right here on earth. And the way they're going to do that is you can't just attack individuals here and there. You have to have a systemic warfare, or what we might call propaganda. You have to turn around a whole society or a whole world in order to win the battle. So that's why the personal is political, the personal is prophetic, is so important to us. When you identify as a priest, Sarah, do you think that's a personal statement or a political statement? So Sarah says it's a personal statement. Bob, personal, political, when you say you're a priest?
Both.
Both. One or the other. You've got to have one or the other.
I start out personal.
Personal. Anyone else? Political? Kathy? I'm going to go with political. Anyone else? Okay, so we've got mixed answers. So when we call ourselves priests, we're not real priests. We're making a statement about where we fit in this line of warfare or this line of prophecy. So I would suggest that when we personally identify as priests, That's a prophetic statement that we're making. We'll use an old model. The papacy, Sarah, why does the papacy not like you? Is it because you're a woman? Or you're from South Sudan? Or America? What's the problem that the papacy has with you in our old models?
Say
Because you're connected with God. They're connected with God as well. But what have they got against you? The Sabbath. So they pick on every single one of you, not because of your wealth or career or gender or anything. Because they have all the same on their side. They love human beings of all shapes and sizes. Everybody's welcome. Problem they have with you is Sabbath, which we know is a political or a prophetic issue. It's not a personal one. So when you line up in front of them, they don't say, I don't like your hairstyle. Your shoes don't look right, or you're the wrong color. It's not personal. They say the Sabbath is the one that groups you all together. Those pesky Adventists. So we know that to be priest is a prophetic subject. And if you go for priests, you have to have Levites and Nethinims. And that just covers everybody. So we know this is, however way we want to look at this, this is a prophetic subject. That's what I want us to understand. And that's why this structure is so important to us. Because it answers the great question that all of us have. What's important in life? It has to be the great test. I would say many of us are failing the test. Sure, many of us are failing the test, even though I don't want to say that. I don't want to beat people up. But I think we're failing it in ways that we're not aware of. And I want to suggest the reason why many of us are failing this test is because of something that I've not allowed you to do up till now, which I'm going to do. That the prophetic experience, the political, the Sunday law, this great test, which is out there, is now merging with what? It's merging with our personal experience. in a way that it's never done before. So in the past, if you're an abused wife, you can go, if I can put it this way, you can go under the radar and not make an issue, not complain. Or if I put it in a more harsh way, you can justify your silence. It's the Christian thing to do, to turn the other cheek. So we have a theory, prophecy, the Sunday law, Sabbath, Sunday, and your personal experience isn't connected to that. So you don't make an issue of it. You just swallow your pain. Or you avoid it. You don't think about it. Which is all fine. For a small element of us, that student, but not me, they're confronted with a personal Sabbath issue. I had mine a few years ago. This member has theirs now. So when you start seeing that the Sabbath is the prophetic test, the politic, how can you then go to the Sabbath and make it what? Make it personal. Can you make it your personal choice of how you confront the Sabbath? If it's a subject of prophecy, people have said no. I agree with them. It's difficult to get out of that hole. The great test is sexism and gender. My problem is I was brought up wrong. Cut me some slack, if that translates well. Be gentle on me. And people are saying, no. You may have some personal stuff, baggage, but you can't do what you want as a man because you were brought up wrongly. I'm saying, but I had bad parents and I had bad this and that. And I hear all the women saying, they just sound like excuses to me. I'm saying that's a bit legalistic. Can't we go for the spirit of the law? And people say no, because it's the great test. And is this going to be a spiritual thing or a legal thing? The letter or the spirit? Which one? Sorry? It's going to be the letter. All those Hebrew boys on the plains of Dura, what were they not allowed to do? we've got letter and spirit. What are they not allowed to do? They're not allowed to follow the spirit of the law. Esther's cousin, Mordecai, what does he refuse to do? Bow. He refuses to bow. What does he tell Esther to do? To bow. So explain the hypocrisy of that. So he would say, I'm guessing, I follow the letter. But in times of trouble, in difficulty, when it gets painful, at the threat of loss, we just follow the spirit. And as that general said to one of the prophets, you know that when I bow down to the idol, I'm really bowing down to the true God. So please make a deal with God that I don't get into trouble. And I don't know the reason behind that, but as a Gentile, he got away with it. But the Hebrew boys couldn't get away with it. I mean, all of them, not just those three. You can't bow down and pretend you're worshiping God. It won't work. And it won't work for God. Because it works for the king. He accepts that. So, if the Sabbath is this great societal prophetic test, you can't make it up as you go along, can you? Because what are your neighbors doing with their binoculars in the Sunday law history? What are your neighbors doing in the Sunday law history? They're watching you. In the old days, they got their binoculars. Now they've got their phones and they're recording your behavior. And they know when you switched your TV off, if it was before or after Sabbath. They check if you're hanging your washing out on Sabbath. And all that's legalism. But when the prophetic test comes, that's what you'll get caught on. The legalism. So, if the person is political, how can we say this is the personal journey that I'm going on in my Sabbath keeping? When it's a political issue. So I don't say any of that to make any conclusions or to attack anybody. I want to put that thought aside for the moment. If this gender sexism is the great final test, the omega, You can't live a personal life that mitigates against that, that opposes that ideology, can you? And in America, we're pretty legalistic because we won't even sing the hymns anymore. And we're changing the hymns. We're so legalistic here. That was my idea, really. Another thing we imported to the States. That was a joke. You don't have to translate that. So my point is, I've not heard conversations where people are saying we're being too legalistic about sexism. We can make our own choices, figure out equality in our own way. And the reason I think we're not doing that, I don't think it's as base that Elder Tessa's got a hammer over us and we're fearful of her. I think it's this line. Everything that we saw about the Sabbath Sunday issue, now we've transferred to the sexism gender issue. And the legalism with which we approached the Sabbath back in the day, it seems to me to be the same legalism with which we're approaching the subject of radical feminism. Nobody blinks an eye. Nobody complains. If someone posted a bad article or a good article from a bad source, they just get told off. And Fox News have a good news department, apparently. I don't know. Has a good news department. And we say, doesn't matter. Can anything good come out of Fox? Okay, the reality has to be yes, doesn't it? If you just do a chiasm or a compare and contrast, I don't know who the equivalent of Fox is. Is it, we'll go CNN. Because a lot of bad comes from them. So you must know that prophetically or just our modeling would say good things can come from Fox. Point I'm making, this movement has a stack of legalism when it comes to this great test. Gender and sexism. But now we're questioning the legalism of Sabbath keeping. And my question is why? Is it because we're Laodicean? We just want to make money and get good jobs. We want to have an easy life with our friends and family. I know people who destroyed their family relationships, their family ties because of the Sabbath. And now some people think it's to the glory of God that we break Sabbath. So my question is, why the change? Is it because we have a consciousness or maybe a subconsciousness that because the Sabbath is not political, not prophetic, it therefore becomes solely, only personal? And if that's the case, of course we're all okay to approach Sabbath our own unique way. We honor God on the Sabbath bit in our own way because it's a personal matter. Not a political or a prophetic one. Either that, or we're Laodicean, or there's another reason that escapes my mind. So I can't remember what time we started because I'm pretty sure I'm over time. So I want to stop the meeting or end the meeting with that thought. Everything that I've said is not a criticism of anybody's belief system. I'm making no moral judgment about anybody's behavior regarding the Sabbath or sexism. And I think I could get in trouble if I said, you're okay to, I'm not going to judge you on how sexist you are. I think I could get in trouble if I said, I'm not going to judge you on how sexist you are. But I think I could get into trouble if I said, you're not keeping Sabbath properly. There has been a change in our movement, and I think we need to understand why. Either we carry on or we reevaluate. I don't know, but this is my guess. The answer to this question lies in this line here that we've drawn. The Eden to Eden line in combination with the personal is political concept. I think we can find an answer in these models. And so people's different ideas about the Sabbath, its meaning, how we approach it, can be resolved. Let's close this prayer. Dear God, I, on behalf of everybody, want to thank you. As priests, we bow before you, realizing our role and our responsibility in the great controversy from the beginning to the end. As we confront right before us the great test, the subject of equality, sexism, and gender, We know that we have to be firm on the legal issues. On a personal level. We want to also understand our relationship to the Sabbath. What it means, what its purpose is. So that we can have a holistic model that will carry us to the end. Give us strength to this end. And may each of us question and speak freely about what we think, what we believe. But we need your strength and your grace to be able to do that. As a priest, I'm scared, I'm worried about giving my opinion. I'm worried about being judged. So I ask for your grace and your strength that you have promised to give me and to give all of us, so that we feel free to speak honestly and openly. And you invite us to come reason with you, to come discuss and to think about these things with you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, everybody. Farewell.
Thank you, Elder Parminder. And thank you, everybody, for attending. We hope to see you tomorrow at the same time, which is 9:30 a.m. local time in Arkansas. So thank you very much, and we'll close the meetings now.